You're watching today's special, and we're focusing on basic education's readiness for the 2021 academic year, considering the devastation that COVID-19 has really brought upon the system. With me for this discussion is Dr. Simelane. He is, of course, the Department of Basic Education's Chief Director for Curriculum Support and Monitoring. David Korte, President of the South African Principals Association. Lebogang, Montjane, the Executive Director of the Independent Schools Association of Southern Africa. Matakanye, the General Secretary of the National Association of School Governing Bodies, and Professor Brahm, Fleisch, an educational expertise from Wits University. Well, just a short while ago, Dr. Simelane was speaking about a new feature that basic education will start embracing around automation to manage to be able to go into classes. Then I was thinking about the digital divide. I saw an article recently by the World Economic Forum about the need for African governments post-COVID-19 to move with speed and urgency to embrace technology and innovation and use it in terms of providing digital learning. But we do know, gentlemen, that in South Africa, we have the most expensive data in the world, or one of the most expensive data in the world. We know about the digital divide. Matakanye referred to the rural areas, and not every child in 2020 was able to access any learning through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, or whatever digital platforms was used. So realistically, what should we be doing? I want your thoughts, David, from a headmaster's perspective, from what the schools are thinking about. How can we ensure that we provide digital learning post-COVID-19 into 2021 and being mindful of access, especially for a majority of our kids? I understand about 12 million learners in South Africa, for example, in the public school system, many of them in rural areas.
In the public sector, and the majority of our schools are no-fee schools. So these are not schools where there's lots of money washing around and people can suddenly embrace the digital era. But just to take one step back and saying, what did we learn from lockdown? Well, schools that were able to offer remote learning during lockdown discovered that a lot of children, and it seems to be that the vast majority of children struggled a little bit with online learning. It doesn't suit everyone, and in actual fact, our schools deliver education best face-to-face in classroom. So I would say when you're bringing digital material and IT into the classroom, you're looking at a blended learning model where you would back up what you're doing in class with the face-to-face learning with IT support and using technology in the classroom and allowing the children to use their phones. And that does come down to data, you're right, so it is a big issue. But children in this country seem to all have phones. And so whether you're very rich or very poor, if you have access to a phone, you don't have data. And I think the big game changer in South Africa would be giving children access to data.
Yeah, a hybrid model might work. I have a grandnephew, Lebogang, who goes to one of those not so well resource independent schools south of Johannesburg, and they were like 25 in their class, and during lockdown they were lucky to be 10 on Zoom, so you'd have 15 or so children not being able to attend class. What is the thought of independent schools, especially for those not so well resourced, around digital learning?
I really must commend our service providers, because what has happened is that when we saw as the SASA what happened with what they had provided for university students, both MTN and Vodacom came to the party. They both gave us reduced rates, both for devices and data. And I really do think that we as a government, as a nation, we need to do something quite urgently about the cost of data, especially for education. I was really taken aback when I was talking to our Indian counterparts, where no one lost any teaching and learning because data prices are so low in India that teaching and learning continued to lag down. So we as a nation really need to look at that, and the regulators need to look at that quite urgently, because I think that really we have gone a bit in the way of getting those special rates for our members. but certainly that's something that I hope that can be expanded to all of education.
Maybe we need free data in education. Ntate Matakanye, what's your thought about digital learning?
Moyane, I did not hear well.
What are your thoughts as the governing bodies, school governing bodies, around digital learning?
You see, no, it's quite a good innovation. It's quite a good innovation. But the question that we ask is that how possible is it in the categories of schools that I've mentioned? Then I heard David talking about poor or rich. I mean, when you use a cell phone that is referred to as Sepeta Mabak, really, how do you access education from there? Because when you talk about the cell phone, then you must talk about a cell phone that is able to have all those apps. Then you'll be able to do that. But another thing is that now, really and truly, I think government must intervene here in terms of data, because our people are not working, as I've indicated already, particularly during this time of COVID-19. It has destroyed the little jobs that people had. But now, how do we access that? And for when? When? Because right now, as I'm talking to you, that Moyane, children, some of them are going to, because we have got these two types of children. We have got children who are to pass into universities next year. We have got children who will remain in the schools next year. Now, when we discuss this matter, we must also look into those two categories of children to say, how do we really meet the Department of Higher Education? How do we assist these children who are going to pass over? Because somebody mentioned earlier on, and I think this is a point that we must also look into very seriously. The waste generation, the waste generation, because this very grade 12s, if we are not going to concentrate very well, they are just forgotten generation. They are going to be there between university and high school, or they're just to be in the township and in those areas. Because, I mean, they've lost. What is it that we are saying? Because all the preparations are made for maybe the grade 10s currently, the grade 11s currently, who are going to be the grade 12s. But what about the grade 12s that are going to pass? And as I said, that Moyane, is that really and truly, how do we want the how part of it in terms of the rural schools, in terms of the working class township schools?
I'm sure you're not the only one, Tate Matakanya, who wants the how. But I want to bring Dr. Simelane. Dr. Simelane, I know it is not the mandate of the Department of Education to regulate service providers, but education is very key for the future of this country. And there are calls, as I've said, by the likes of the World Economic Forum for African governments to move quickly to embrace technology and innovation and maybe be creative around finding solutions. Do you think free data in education, in basic education, especially for the under-resourced schools, as an example, could be a solution?
Most definitely, Brother Danny. Free data will take us a long way in terms of going forward as to how we can integrate ICT into curriculum delivery and even using ICT platforms for assessment as we move and as we are preparing ourselves for the fourth industrial revolution. And I can say that in basic education, fortunately, even before the advent of COVID-19 in South Africa, there were already plans for stepping up or ramping up the connectivity of all our schools in the country. We started, Minister has directed that we prioritize all special schools, that is schools for learners with special education needs. We also prioritize farm schools and schools that practice multi-grade teaching. So we have engaged ICASA, DTPS, and also the mobile providers in this regard. To do the connectivity of all the schools.
Well, that sounds good. Yeah, that sounds good. At least there is an awareness by government, and you are talking to the relevant people. Professor Fleisch, digital learning for us. I mean, David says we need a blended maybe model, a hybrid model. You're hearing Dr. Simelane say there are plans afoot. Government is engaging with the various people, but we all seem to say if you're going to post COVID-19 into 2021 have any kinds of learning, you can't ignore digital learning.
Obviously, we need to be looking at how to do it effectively, but there are many barriers. And at the same time, I think we need to recognize that there are older technologies that have very, very good penetration. So radio is available everywhere in the country, and it's a very important part. So we need to think very carefully about how do you use radio and how do you create a radio environment that can be powerful for learning. Certainly television, again. Almost all of our households in urban areas have access to television. We need to see it as an incredibly powerful learning tool. It's already established. Everybody's got technology that makes it available in most households. And so we need to create much better penetration of quality educational television available for all learners across the curriculum at the right time. No point in providing educational television in the middle of the night. So we need to find a way to make sure that children have access to educational television of quality at the right time, at the right level. And I think that's a very important part of what we need to be putting in place for 2021, because inevitably there are going to be disruptions again in 2021. And if we don't have plans for radio and television, we're not going to have the ability to address the kind of issues that our colleagues are talking about, which are children in the most rural communities and the least likely to have access to data. Television and radio will be able to do that in a way that no other form of education will be able
Professor
to do.
Fleisch, you've raised a very relevant point, because mostly when we talk about the digital learning, we think mobile, we think smartphones, we think data. You're quite right. There is radio and there is television. And we've heard from Dr. Simelane that the Basic Education Department has been busy engaging with the various stakeholders, especially on the mobile side. But there's radio and there's television. Okay, we're going to carry on our discussion shortly here. The next part, I just want I want to hear views of the panelists here. What would they be advising a parent to be doing now? And we are asking this against this background. COVID-19 has devastated the school year in 2020. We've heard there's not been much learning. Many learners, many pupils are not going to be able to go through from one internal grade to the next. They might have to repeat, but there'll be others who will move on. So are we going to face backlogs? And if we do, how are we going to address that? What do you tell parents? Should parents be worried? And what about sizes of classrooms, for example, with social distancing now being a norm? So we'll just get some advice and some thoughts from our panelists shortly to parents. Stay with us.